G'day everyone, welcome to Podcast Highlights. You may have seen this series before on the channel, bringing it back now. It's been about a year since we've had the last episode, but what I'm doing is going back through our past episodes on the Trademate Sports Betting podcast, picking out some of the best episodes and then picking out bits and pieces from that actual podcast rather than you guys sitting through an hour or more of a podcast to find the best bits. So I know there's some lazy people out there who can't be stuck listening to an hour podcast, so hopefully this helps. So today I'm kicking things off with Jeeve Jeyaratnam, episode 34. He is a Football Odds Compiler, Goalscorer Compiler, and he had some very interesting stuff to say about compiling in general, football compiling in general, but most importantly, how to bet on goal scorer prices, or at least how to find value there. Hope you guys enjoy.
It is a scam when you don't allow everyone to operate on fair terms.
We are the Robin Hoods of sports betting. We take something back from the rich bookies and enable our customers to beat them instead.
Is there any goal scoring metric that, maybe sports bettors, or maybe they're better referred to as gamblers, look at that you think is just completely useless when you're trying to price up a goal scorer?
Well, you have to be careful not to be swayed by recency bias too much. It's important to consider the quality of the opposition. If you're thinking of, he scored 3 goals in the last 4 matches, but actually they've played teams in the bottom third of the league, and they've won the games sort of 4-5-0. You need to consider if that player is exceeding his expectations within a team, because don't forget the bookmakers or certainly us as suppliers are factoring in most of the stuff people think of already. So you have to try and think: are they factoring in something or not factoring in something that's missing? And it's important to consider that whether that player has a value in excess of what you believe to have, in excess of what the bookmaker does. And it's very difficult to work that out. But one of the key things to look at, I think, are shots. And if a player is producing lots of shots, or his XG, if you look at his XG, then essentially either he's going to score or he's not good enough. And if you can determine the difference there could well be opportunity to impinge on and steal some of the value. But it's a difficult one. If you've got a high scoring team, for example, and you've got a player you may have 2 players that are sort of in the top goal scorer for the league bracket, but those goals are likely to be spread all through the team. And so when you're looking at prices, you go, he scores a lot, but the team scores a lot. So, again, that's factored in. But especially in terms of first goal scorer, you need to be careful, because if the team's scoring a lot and the goals are spread out throughout the team, then there's your chance of netting the first one is reduced. But when you've got a less able team with a particularly high goal scorer in it, then perhaps there's some value to be looked at there. The hardest thing to forecast is sort of change of position that wasn't foreseen. For example, Eric Peters is one that was brought to my attention recently for Burnley. He's been playing higher up the pitch, traditionally a fullback. He's been playing as a wide midfielder, and therefore getting higher up, and therefore more likely perhaps to score than he was. So things like that get fed back if punters have latched on to the fact that players are out of position. And I've said this before on other mediums, but the real trick is if you can find a player who's playing out of position from his regular spot, then essentially there'll be massive value involved with the prices. I think there's a correlation between the standard of the league or the quality of the league and the speed you have to act on information when it becomes available. So for something like the English Premier League or the German Bundesliga or something like that, by the time the likes of the average punter has seen the news, the market has already moved. And then if you're betting into that, you're doing what the Americans call betting into steam, or you're basically snowballing onto the back of news that has already broken. And if that news has already shifted the price, you following it in at a lesser price is that's not going to work long term. The further you go down the league ladder in terms of the hierarchy and the structure of the league, say down to, if you go down next to, say, the Dutch league, the time you have to make your move after the information becomes available on a local Dutch news site is far longer, because the major players aren't necessarily all focused on that particular league. And there are reasons for that they wouldn't be, because if you're a big Asian bookmaker, punter, then your limits are going to be smaller in smaller leagues because the prices aren't so confident. So you kind of focus yourself on some of the major leagues if you're really looking to shift money. But that's where anyone can get a bit of an edge if they feel that they have a very, very good news source, or they have a local. So, for example, the Dutch league, they will have a press conference on a Friday. Each team will have a press conference on a Friday. And so by sort of mid-afternoon UK time, the local news sites are reporting the team news from the press conference. And you can pick up, I use those sources a lot. You can pick up all sorts of information about players. And the critical bits are finding players that, provided you already understand who's suspended and who's long-term injured, is then providing information about which players are maybe playing out of position. And that's really where the biggest advantage can be found. If you can find a bookmaker that's offering prices about a player in this instance that is playing as a striker instead of a defender or a midfielder, then there's no doubt there's going to be huge value there. But just finding that information first is possible in lower leagues. It's also more liable to get your account closed faster, but
yeah.